Weidemann.
You cannot imagine how many beers that cost me that he introduces me like that. Every year I'm going broke paying his alcohol every night. Just joking. Okay, I can actually just briefly introduce myself because if you're too lazy to Google me, I worked in the game industry for now 27 years, so in 2017 it will be 30 years, unbelievable. I shipped over 100 titles. I forgot like 10% of them. Sometimes people come to me and, oh, you worked on this title. I said, oh yeah, I remember, and I totally forgot. I started as a programmer. I did art, level design, game design. I ran my own company for 10 years. I was CTO of a public listed company that's, I guess, as high as you can get in Germany. And since 2007, I'm consulting companies how online games work. And online games, I originally meant massive multiplayer online games who went free to play at some point, and I learned how that worked and tried to teach companies. Since then, companies usually reduce me to the money side, meaning that I'm just doing monetization stuff, but it's important that these two things are hooked together. So online game mechanics and monetization is one circle, so you should not forget one or the other. I speak at various conferences, and there are just some companies I work for. Some of them you might remember. Most companies I work for are no longer existing, but that might be true in 10 years as well. So publishers vanish more often than people. And as Scott mentioned, I won the Evil Game Design Challenge 2014. And the topic was Minecraft. Some career highlights, besides the hundreds of titles on Amiga and Commodore 64 I shipped, with my own company, Söldner, Secret Wars, and Panzer Elite. Panzer Elite, I guess, is the most famous title I did at that time, when simulations still were high-end. Currently, my largest client who booked most of my time is Ubisoft. I work on most of their free-to-play titles. The latest title I'm working on is Assassin's Creed Identity on mobile. That has been soft launched in New Zealand and Australia and will come out soon worldwide, so you might want to check that out. Let's go on topic. Part of my job is to understand how really successful free-to-play games work. If you don't understand that, you're missing the point if you want to design your own. And I did various talks about my dissecting, which I usually do for clients, but sometimes I just do it for better understanding for myself. And these are the games I usually talk public about, what I find. It's a three-step process, which is really easy. Everybody can do it when you have a designer mind and can objectively look at yourself while playing. So let me just quickly step you through these 3 points. The first thing is that I try to find as many metrics as I can, usually using the internet or App Annie or many other tools which are out there, and write them all down. You find lots of information. Because I'm talking about King.com here and their games, that's really easy because they are a public listed company. So they have to be really honest about their numbers, and if you look at their quarterly results and if you can read all the financial stuff, you get a lot of data from their games and their performance, which is really interesting because for some companies it's really hard to get data. I play these games, of course, as a non-payer. So I start playing them, and I'm playing them for a long time. And as Tomo said in his previous talk here, he plays a game even if he hates it, as long until he really starts to love it. And sometimes you have to do that. If there's a really famous game you have to dissect, and you hate that game, you have to ask yourself, listen, there are 100 million players playing this game, so somehow people love it, but I hate it. Why is that? So this is another important question you can answer yourself. So I try to reset my brain, forget everything I know about the game and just play it as a non-payer and see, how the game talks to me. And I notice how the game talks to me in terms of monetization. So, when does the game offer me certain things to make my life easier or better in this game? And I just memorize that. The next step is that I actually start to pay for this game. And I start paying as the most popular entry point, which is slightly different on mobile and on PC. But on PC or on console, usually it's $10, and on mobile it's a little bit less. But nevertheless, this popular entry point I pay, and I buy the most powerful stuff I can find, which help me, and try to examine what does that change, how the game talks to me. And that's an important step, because if I pay money and the game still talks in the same language like before, I'm not a happy user, right? So if I pay, the game suddenly should, like on speed, on drugs. It's like, oh, whoa, this is so cool, now things get rolling. And when your cash runs out in the game, you should long for more. This is a really important step, because this is the most difficult point in monetization, how to pursue players for the second payment. And many games fail exactly in this. You know, they are too cautious. You know, they get your money, but they don't give you like the rush you really need, where you say, "Oh, this is so cool." And just as an information, payers are not grown in your game. Usually, payers come to your game as a payer per se. So a payer comes to your game, you know, plays it, and say, "Hey, this is fun," and pays really fast. Like 50% of your payers will convert in the first few days, because they want to experience the game as a payer. And if the game is not better as a payer, you will lose these people. So it's a really important motivation process here. So I go into some King.com metrics I found, which, you know, there's so much in the internet about King.com, but some interesting conclusions about that. And I always tell you that you have to be cautious. You have to understand how these numbers actually are defined, because a daily active user, as an example, is defined differently by every company. So if one company claims we have 1 million daily active users, they might define this daily active user completely different than someone else. So you have to, you know, in order to compare numbers, you have to learn the definitions, and the definitions are really hard to get. So who we are talking about? King is a company which is really huge. Candy Crush is, I guess, a game everybody of you should know. King is a $1 billion company. It's one of the largest free-to-play companies in the world. That's how big it is. And if you have the share value, you see, you know, they're actually ranking in the top 10 here in this chart, and, you know, it's not too bad how they're performing. They're performing really, really well for a company living on a couple of match 3 games, which any programmer can actually clone in a week. They're doing over $1 billion. So how the hell are they doing this? And that's an interesting point by itself. Interestingly, they cannot do anything else than match 3 games, but that's a different story. In terms of traffic on Facebook, they are the king of Facebook. There's no company who draws as much traffic as they are. And the interesting point is that they're not earning a lot of money on Facebook. They're using Facebook as a marketing platform. So they blur users on their games on Facebook and convert them to mobile. And on mobile, that's where their money comes from. And you will see some of the numbers in a second. So App Annie, always a good tool. You know, it's free. You can just register. Is basically showing you the history in the charts. So this is the top grossing history of Candy Crush on iPhone in the United States. As you can see, it's a flat line, meaning that they never left the top 1 spot. They're the top grossing game, and it's a match 3 game. So how can that be? There's a question you should ask yourself. Even if you hate match 3 games, you know, you should play that and see, you know, why the hell are they, you know, earning so much money. The other game is Pyramid Solitaire Saga I'm actually using, and there's a reason why I'm using 3 games from King, because there are a lot of similarities and you can actually learn a lot comparing these games. This is a little bit more flaky, but nevertheless is pretty successful. Not, you know, it dwarfs against Candy Crush Saga, but nevertheless everybody of you, you know, would be really happy to just have this game in their portfolio. If you haven't played that game, you know, it was for a long time my favorite game from King. But I stopped playing when I actually noticed something, which I will reveal on my scandal slide. I always have that slide. And of course Bubble Witch Saga, which I played through when it was on Facebook, so I finished the whole game. They published a sequel, which is now performing better than the original, because they had problems getting the controls working on mobile. Before mobile hit the world, Bubble Witch was the moneymaker for King. It was the biggest game they had. Most people don't remember that time, which is funny. Candy Crush was like number 3 in their portfolio. And then mobile hit, and Candy Crush was really compatible with mobile due to the controls, and suddenly that was number 1, and Bubble Witch, you know, went down all the way until they changed the controls. And that's number 2. So in terms of monetization, yes, this number is real. Candy Crush Saga has 93 million daily active users. That's more people than Germany has citizens. That's how big it is. The funny thing is, in your human brain, when you read 93, that doesn't sound much. I should write all the zeros on the back, then you suddenly realize how much that is. There's no game in the world which sold as many copies as Candy Crush. No GTA 5, nothing, you know, sold as many copies. So that's, you know, that's a huge number. Daily, every day, nearly 100 million users. Now there are the other numbers from their big games, like Pet Rescue Saga, 15 million. Even if you take the low one, like Bubble Witch Saga, they have 3 million daily active users. Everybody of you would be really happy to have just that game in their portfolio. But, you know, their big Candy Crush, of course, dwarfs everything. So if you combine all this, they have 128 million daily active users they can monetize from, and 324 million monthly active users. However they count them, no one knows, but they defined some new acronyms like MUU and MUP. MUU means monthly unique user. So this is the interesting number. Monthly unique users means really if a user logs in multiple times a month, he just counts once. So they just count the unique users. If they deduct the users who just log in once a month and never come back, I don't know, but nevertheless, these are the interesting numbers. The MUPs is the other one, is a monthly unique payers. So how many of these hundreds of millions of users are actually paying? And now you actually have the conversion rate, which is down there. So they have between 4 and 5% paying users. 4 and 5% is, for PC, it's really low. Usually on PC, on free-to-play games, you have between 10 and 25%. On mobile, it's high, but this is an average between all their games. And that's a killer, because you don't know how that average is calculated. So there might be that Candy Crush only has 1%, but all the others have 10%, and suddenly the average is like that. It's like, you don't really know how the numbers is coming from, but nevertheless, you can calculate roughly the revenue conversion rates, ARPUs, and all that kind of stuff you need. Now, the interesting fact, the revenue sources are listed in the public statements, meaning that this sentence is the most interesting one, that 3/4 of the revenue is coming from mobile users. All the rest is then outside of mobile. And that shows that Facebook for them is just like a user acquisition vehicle for them and not their major income source. And 12 million pairs is not too shabby either. So the sources from that, you can actually, there's much more detail on that site. Gamesbrief.com is from Nicholas, his site, and he analyzed the public statement and drew all these numbers and commented them. That in itself is interesting because he actually did all my work, which I'm thankful. So if you analyze all the numbers, you see that one game, Candy Crush, makes up nearly about 80% of their overall revenue. So this company, King, who does over $1 billion a year, is dependent on one single game. And you will notice that most companies out there who are really successful in the free-to-play space have only one title which is super performing and have a hard time making another title which is super performing. It's a kind of attribute of most free-to-play game companies. That's another topic in itself I might talk about, why that happens, why is that. But I bet that King.com will not have another $1 billion selling title in the next 2 or 3 years. They will have difficulties actually doing that. Another thing which is interesting is the marketing expenses, how much they actually spend on marketing. So they're spending $377 million in 2013. And their spending is continually on the rise, and if you add the top 10 free-to-play companies in the world, there's like $2 or $3 billion advertising spent every quarter. How they acquire users, and this is the main cause for the user acquisition crisis. Why the user is so expensive? It's the fault of these companies because they're spending so much money, and you cannot compete as a small one. So this is like the #1 fact you can read from this number. You also see that although King is a European company, or more than half of the income is coming from the US. That's true for most successful free-to-play companies, that they're doing half of their income. If you deduct Asia, Asia is like Alien Planet, that's very different. But other free-to-play companies do half of their revenue in the US. And interesting in itself is how their revenue is distributed in Europe. So you can see how strong individual countries are for the casual gaming market. So if you ever want to do a casual game and you want to target individual countries in Europe, you can measure Candy Crush Saga performances and see which country is big and which isn't. This is just a bunch of slides which should show one thing, that King.com has a problem. Then the money they do with Candy Crush Saga is declining. And you see that on everywhere in the charts, meaning that they're desperately looking for another title which replaces that lost revenue. And that's normal for a title which is now like 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, or even older, I don't remember, that once you climb the hill, it's kind of sort of declining because the game kind of becomes static at some point. They have a new one, Candy Crush Saga Saga, however it's called, and that's pretty successful. It's on the rise, and that might actually replace the lost revenue, but it's kind of a sequel to Candy Crush. And doing a sequel to a free-to-play game itself is risky, but it seems that they can actually pull it off. Once you can, I guess you can download the slides at some point and take a detailed look. And there's also the link there where I pulled all this data from. The key attribute here to learn is that at some point, even if you have a super successful free-to-play game, all of them monetize and grow, and at some point you reach the peak because saturation is reached, and then you kind of plateau off at some point. And how to rescue that from this plateau, how you want to kind of add revenue on top, is actually written all over the internet. You do expansions, you do new features, new stuff. You can check out even World of Warcraft, how they do that. It's a strange thing to say because it's not free to play, but it's an online game. It has the same attribute. It plateaus off at some point. They ship an expansion. Bam, they have 12 million subscribers again. So let's take a quick look at the 3 games. Who has not played Candy Crush in this room? 1, 2, 3. Okay, sorry for that, but I'd simply assume that everybody has played Candy Crush. If you're in the free-to-play business, you should, because the top 10 free-to-play games, all of you should actually play. If you do not, it's not good for your job. Is that too honest? No, that's okay. So Candy Crush Saga, or CCS in short, you should simply download that. It's free and play it. It is a game which has certain similarities. So you have a map which shows you the levels, and the levels are connected, and you have to play one level after the other in a linear fashion. So you finish level 1, and then you have access to level 2. You finish level 2, you have access to level 3, etc. And they divide the whole map into sections, and every section you finish, you have to kind of unlock the next one, and in the next one, a new game feature comes out. That's an important concept they introduced first to the world. This metagame map is now common strategy in most of the casual games, and it's actually a must-have. But they actually invented that. They have a kind of viral effect that you can send moves to or lives to your friends via Facebook. It's an energy-based system. You have 3 lives, and if you fail 3 levels, you have to wait until it refills again, or your friend actually sends you lives. And that helps because you can spam all your friends on Facebook and other social media to actually recruit other players. You see here that before the level starts, they show you that screen. They show you the high scores of your friends on the lower bottom, and on the top you see the conditions, how to win that level, and then you have 3 buttons where you can actually press and monetize. And these 3 are shown to you before the game starts. So they assume you only monetize when you have failed this level at some point, because otherwise you would never buy the stuff when you don't know what the challenge is, right? So first look at the challenge, you play the level, you know how it works, and then you know which one of these 3 things actually help you most. This is a strange concept, and somehow many casual games actually copy that. This is strange, that they assume you fail, which is, I think, a bad move, but on the other hand, it's just 3 items they sell. And then you go into the game itself, you match 3 things, and you just, try to drop something out of the level or reach a certain score, depending what the goal is. And in the game itself, the monetization options are not that much. You see the boosts on top left on the small little buttons, and you can use them in the level to help you. And if it's empty, you can, basically refill that. But that's about it. The next title, Bubble Witch Saga 1 and 2, I just mingled that together because it's a very similar game, looks nearly identical. As you can see, even the buttons are identical. So it seems that King.com has this UI construction set where they put everything together, and all the games look really similar. This game has a meta map as well, as you can see on the left. All the levels you can finish, and depending on your performance, you get 1, 2, or 3 stars. Interestingly, if you have 1, 2, or 3 stars, you don't gain anything for that. You can brag about with your neighbor or your friend, I have 3 stars at this level, you have 2. And he says, so what? I don't care, I just finished the level, I move on. Interestingly, they dropped the concept that you get rewards for that. There's in the original Bubble Witch, you could actually earn rewards, and I think that's an important thing they're actually missing now. And of course, on the right side, you can send lives. Of course, there's a lot of clickbait in here. Usually, when you see the menu with hundreds of friends, you simply say send, and suddenly you just spam all your friends who never played the game. But there's a small little button you can press, which only lists the people who actually play the game. You ask for lives. So this is the usual viral clickbait thing most casual games do via Facebook. And then you're entering the level, and you have to match colored bubbles, and you have 3 bubbles to shoot from, and here the things you can buy are listed on the bottom. So there are colored bubbles. You can actually buy a rainbow bubble which hits every color, or a single bubble which explodes, and so on. So things which can help you in this level. And here you have to free that little ghost in the middle by shooting away all the bubbles. And of course you have a limited amount of moves, and if the moves are low, you can buy more moves. Pyramid Solitaire Saga, as again, it looks identical, title, figure, button. Even the menus are identical, which is funny. Again, here you have the meta map with all the levels. I actually finished that game. That was the last level before they shipped the expansion. And on the right side, they're even offering you 5 different things to buy before you see the challenge, and then you simply go in here and play the game itself. The game is a variant of Solitaire. Solitaire, the game was shipped on Windows. You basically have 1 stack of cards, and this card you can put on top, and you have to clear the board, or pick up the golden cards here, and you can then finish that level. And you have 1 joker, it's called in English. And you have 1 joker to use, and of course you can buy more jokers. And you can see on the lower side your boost you just bought. And I'm mentioning these boosts because these boosts have a specific attribute, and most people don't realize how these things talk to them. And that's a point I'm coming into payment motivation in a second. The thing is that all these games have one in common. How they are, if you forget the topic and how the match 3 works, or the core loop in itself, that they're all identical in terms of high-level game design. So what they do is that they take any core game loop, a match 3 title, a bubble shooter, a Space Invaders, Solitaire, whatever you can have of a really core game loop, they take. And they iterate on that. And then they make variants of that core game loop. So they add, with variants, I mean that it's harder, it's just 1 color or multiple colors or different setups, or suddenly there's a new game element in it. And these variants, they simply sort by difficulty, and they program that. And they sort that for progress. So the more difficult the element gets, they put it at the end. This is called rational game design, how they actually sort that stuff. This is something you can read up on Gamma Sutra, how that works. It's a really easy concept, and it's like basic knowledge of every game designer. The key here is that the core game loop is very easy to understand, like match 3. Everybody gets how that works. But the modifications you put in, that you suddenly have like chocolate, which expands every move, or that you have a whirlwind moving around and destroying your candy, kind of this stuff they put in, is like the important thing. You have to measure how difficult it is and then introduce them later on, 1 by 1, not all at once. And when you have sorted this by progress, they design this metagame map. And the metagame map is simply, sequential 1 to 300, however levels you have, and you sort them. And they measure the performance of the player, as I said, with a star rating, 1, 2, or 3 stars. Some games reward you when you finish multiple levels with 3 stars. So they take 1 sector, and you can earn, let's say, 25 stars. And if you earn 20 stars, they basically give you some boost on top. This is an important retention method to get players replaying levels so that they perform better. So often players just barely finish the level and they get 1 star. They will never play that level again, because if they perform just 1 star, they usually hate that level. But if they get a reward by having more stars collected in 1 section, they're getting actually back to the level and try to finish it with at least 2 or 3 stars so they can unlock that reward. And that's something King.com actually invented with Bubble Witch Saga, but they actually dropped that from all their games. Why, I don't know, but I think it's a really important concept to follow. So this meta game map is very important for most casual games. It's a measure for progression. You see your friends, how far they are, you see how they move off, you see where the next level is, where there might be a new feature, how far you progress in the whole game. Although King invented this kind of easy concept for the game, there is 1 game which actually invented the whole metagame concept, and that's Super Mario World 3 on NES. And if you don't know that game, you should actually play that, or the new one, the 3D one, because their metagame is a master challenge in game design. It's like one of the best metagames on earth. And if you ever want to improve on the metagame design, you simply play Super Mario, and all the ideas which are in there are all perfect here, like hidden levels, shortcuts, and all that kind of stuff. They're all missing that, but you know, it will come soon. You can basically read the future by playing Super Mario, how King.com will perform in the next years. But okay, side story. So this metagame map is on top is like now common in most casual games. Sorry. So how do they monetize? I mentioned some of this stuff, right? So in terms of social lives, if you're running out of lives, meaning that you failed a certain number of times, you can ask your friends for lives. This is also monetizing users, because what they usually do is they acquire users for you. So if you have just a few Facebook friends and just one of them plays your game, you want to pursue your friends to play that game, so you can actually ask them every day for more lives because you want to continue playing that. This is another method of user acquisition, but nevertheless it's an indirect monetization. Of course, you can pay and simply refill your lives. Not many people do that. This is like the low income thing, but on the other hand, it's a very interesting viral effect. They monetize on the right side. As you can see, you can repeat the level by simply paying, or recharge your lives by clicking that button. That menu has another problem, which is called clickbait. As you can see, the most obvious button you will click is green. But that's the payment button. That actually costs you gold, which is their currency in the game, and many people click that on accident. They give you a couple of gold as a preview, so you can buy stuff here and there, but you're usually consuming that the first time by clicking that button by accident. And everybody who plays these games click this button at one time or the other, because you know, you play a level, you fail, next click, and say, oh my god, I just spent 9 gold. And this is called clickbait. And clickbait is a really evil thing to do, because it actually fends off your payers. If a payer just paid €5 and you know he's a low income guy, and for him €5 is a lot of money, and he lost some of that by simply accidentally clicking this stuff, he will never buy again. I do not recommend using clickbait just for revenue increase, because it will annoy your payers, and these are the most important customers you have. But nevertheless, I guess King.com has a reason to put that in, because it actually increases their revenue, but it might actually lose them users. The next thing they sell is what I call power items. Most of them are consumables. You pick them before you see the challenge, as I said. Power items means that the basic challenge of the level is solve this puzzle. Like, collect 10 cherries and drop them to the bottom. Every power item you buy basically cheats in the level. It removes the challenge. And that's an important thing. When you ever use that for the first time, it's a cool effect, right? Because that item helps you solve that challenge, that puzzle, if it's too difficult, or because there's such a big random factor in there. But nevertheless, if your neighbor finishes the level without using a power item, and you finish the level by using a power item, try to compare the feelings of those two. Did both have the same challenge in the level? No. One of them used a power item. Actually, one of them cheated, because what King.com is selling with the power items are cheats for the level. And that's kind of an important motivation concept you should keep in your head when you come to a resolution, what is actually bad about the monetization. And they're making money with what I call peer pressure. So this is the old metagame map of Bubble Witch Saga 1, and you see here all the stars and the levels, and there's one sector, and there's actually a reward being paid when you have so much, when you collected a certain number of stars. And you see the Facebook pictures of all these people and how far they progressed. So if you're competing with your neighbor or your friend, and she or he is like 2 levels in advance, and you just catched up, and you're hanging in a level, you're just kind of locked in it, and you cannot solve it for like 2 or 3 days, and suddenly, your neighbor like moved off, and then they say, how did she solve that level? And the first thing you suspect is, she paid, she cheated. This is a kind of side effect on these cheats they sell. But peer pressure, of course, is one important concept. When you show all your friends how far they progress, there's a kind of indirect competition. Even if you don't care about the competition, you're a little bit annoyed that, like the daughter, 7 years old, just started, you see on level 1, And like 4 days later, she progressed, 10 levels ahead of you, and you say like, oh geez, I have to play a little bit more. And the other thing, of course, they do is that they're actually having ads on the right lower corner. You see new game, so they are advertising all their games around the clock. Like you can switch from one game to the other, sometimes attached with the rewards. But this is another thing that they don't want to lose their players by pushing them to their own other games they have. And as I said, clickbait. Clickbait is something you should not do in your games. It annoys people, and you lose important people. I cannot put emphasis on this. It's really important that you don't lose these people, so don't annoy them. But King.com does that repeatedly. So in terms of summary, is that they use peer pressure as a conversion driver. So if that 7-year-old daughter rushes, within a couple of days through all the levels you took like 4 weeks to, you might actually pay a couple of euros to, advance to that really difficult level you're so annoyed with. And all it needs is that you start with a couple of euro. No, yeah, let's pay €1.99 on iPhone, and then you're having fun, and suddenly you say, okay, another €5. And at some point you don't know how much money you spent on this game, because you're used to spending. The threshold is gone. Like I don't pay for that game. They monetize through what I call social lives. So they, I guess their virality factor is really high because people recruit users for them. Their biggest income is mostly consumables from selling power items. They had permanence in their game, which you could buy once and you have it forever, but they actually removed that over time. When you played their game from the beginning, it's really interesting how they changed the features of the game over time. So Candy Crush was very, very different a couple of years ago compared to today. Much more complicated as well and complex. For example, in Pyramid Solitaire Saga, they had a crafting system in there. You could collect gems and diamonds, and with that you could actually manufacture boosts. All of that is gone now. So it seems that they, to make the game more simple is a better effect for them. But I love that, the crafting system. The other thing which is important is that they have a really low conversion. Most people say that on mobile, 3% conversion is as high as you can get. It's the average conversion. That's what most people aim for. I have to say that you have to be really careful with that number, because that number derives from having average conversion through all games. And average has a problem. Average has a problem that actually averages out the peaks. If there are 100 million Candy Crush players and they're 3% conversion, and they're just like a 1 million Clash of Clans players who actually have more than 10% conversion, the average will not show you the high conversion numbers of some of the games. And I can tell you that there are some games out there who have a really high conversion rate, like Clash of Clans, Puzzle and Dragons, etc. They all live not from 100 million users like they do. They are living from 10 to 20 million users, and they have more than 10% conversion rate. So don't bet on 3% conversion rate. If you do the right game, you can have much more. But casual games, the attribute actually is a low conversion. They still do really high revenue, which is a sign of having a high RPPU, which means that the payers actually pay a lot more than usual. And I bet that a lot of their revenue is coming from what I call whales or high payers. It's usually a sign if you do a lot of money but you have a low conversion that you're betting on whales. So why the low conversion? One of the reasons is the target audience. The target audience of King.com largely is female. Of course, there are a lot of men playing the games, but I don't know how much, 60–70% of their audience is female. And females usually are, the best money savers in the household, not the man. So, females are saving money, meaning that they don't spend on games. They're having fun and they repeat. They have all the time in the world if they want to with a casual game. It's not a really complex game, right? And they don't pay as much as men would do. Men are much more sensible in terms of converting them to payers than women are. That's one of the reasons. The other one is that casual games have a low conversion by default because the value of a casual game is not high enough. That's a strange thing to say, but if you have a really complex game like League of Legends or World of Tanks or whatever, it's like a big game, lots of value in it, and if people pay, they have the feeling they get value back. In a match 3 game, it's like, there are like 1,000 match 3 games in the App Store. Why should I pay for this one? There are other games I could play. But it's kind of an attribute of casual games. They have a low conversion rate, meaning that if you do a casual game and want to compete with King.com and the others, which I do not recommend, you have to calculate a low conversion. Was that funny? Yeah. Then there's another problem they have, which is I call the content war, meaning that their high payers and their high-profile players are playing through the levels in a really high speed. So if you're at the end of the game and you're waiting for the next content patch, it comes and suddenly they say, oh, 30 more levels. And you say, what do you mean 30? I finish tomorrow. And I experienced that personally with Pyramid Solitaire. You know, I had like 2 friends. You know, my girlfriend was playing with me and another friend. And there's a content patch, 15 new levels. You know, well, the next day we finished all of them, and you know, waited another month for the content patch to come. And that's what I call content war. You cannot put enough levels into the game to satisfy all the users. And the other problem on the content war on this kind of game is, imagine you have Candy Crush with 500 levels and you're shipping another 30. At some point, if you have a new user starting Candy Crush at level 1 and he sees 500 levels, he might not want to play that game. Like 500 levels to finish it? No. There are still people out there who want to finish a game. And a game with 500 levels, they might not want to finish that, meaning that they might never actually start playing that game. The key thing here is, you know, that paying for the game has a negative feedback. It basically destroys the challenge. The challenge is a puzzle, a level. You have to solve that puzzle. Because there are a lot of random elements, you know, luck plays a factor, which is an important thing I will repeat on the next slide. And when you try that challenge multiple times and suddenly you pay, you feel like cheating. So it's like, I pay, solve this level, but shh, I never paid. This is bad, right? If you pay for a game, you should having fun, and you should tell your neighbor or your daughter or whoever you're playing with, you know, listen, I paid €1 and so much fun, you know, you should try this, it's so cool, you know, everything is exploding, cool, and you get more rewards and stuff. But no, in Candy Crush it's like, shh, I cheated. This is a negative feedback you're getting when paying here. You're basically paying to cheat. And this is not a good way. Imagine you make a PvP game. Imagine in League of Legends to win a match, you know, when you pay, you 80% likely win a match. That would destroy the whole game, but they're actually living from that. So it feels like cheating. It feels that you have a bad consciousness after paying, and this is like not a good feeling because it might prevent the second one, right? And you're rushing through the progress, which is a common problem through free-to-play, by cheating, and at the end you still have to wait for the new content. But, you know, it kind of removes the gratifying feeling by finally beating this one level. You know, you stopped, you know, this one level stopped you progressing for 1 week. Every day you tried it 3, 4, 5 times and you failed. And finally at some point, bam, you solved the level and you're just happy, right? This is totally gone when you paid skipping the level. And that's bad. That's not good. That is the only way they currently try to monetize their game. There's another game I recommend you guys playing and compare to Candy Crush. I will tell you that in the last slide. Which totally removed that negative feeling, and that's good. So if you compare these two games, you see negative impact of paying, positive impact of paying. And the last sentence is something you will notice when you play one of these games intensively. Because it's random in there, the distribution of a lot of things is random in their game, you sometimes have the feeling, the suspicion, the game on purpose gives you the wrong stuff to complete the level. It's something everybody who plays these games, you know, saw. I need red stones. There's no red stone coming for 10 moves now. There's no red stone. I need red stones. And it repeats itself, this feeling that the game sort of cheats on you to lure you to paying. And that's a suspicion. I can actually prove that it's right. The game cheats on you to lure you into paying. You will see often that if you try to solve a level, 10 times you fail, and you always say, the game now cheats, I don't get the right stuff. The next day you get back and try the level. Immediately the first time, bam, you solve the level. It is because the counter resets. You know, they try to lure you into paying. Now, the next day before he leaves, okay, give him that level. That's something they do. And I can prove that in Pyramid Solitaire Saga because there are actually powers which shows you all the cards on the table. And when you use that power and you see all the cards, you see this level is not solvable unless you pay. on purpose. There are other games like Bubble Witch Saga 2 where you can actually prove it, but on the other hand, you know, it's a kind of way the monetization expert, I guess, tries to raise the chance that people are paying. In Bubble Witch, you know, they don't give you for 20 moves the right color. That can be repeatedly, level after level. They switch the color sometimes, which is, you know, to kind of confuse the player that, no, I'm not cheating. But in Candy Crush, it's much harder because there's so much randomness happening to actually prove that. But the plain reason, of course, is to raise conversion and to raise revenue and to fight the content war, because the more you block players from progressing, you know, the longer you have time to ship the next expansion to keep the players in. But on the other hand, if players start to think you're cheating, you know, it's not a good sign. Why doesn't that hurt their company? It's very simple, because the people who play their games cannot talk to each other. There's no chat, no messaging, nothing. There's no big community of 100 million Candy Crush Saga players or Bubble Witch Saga players who actually, you know, can talk to each other. Listen, did you see? Like, I bet if an MIT math professor would analyze the randomness of their games, he would immediately see that it's not truly random. But on the other hand, you know, I bet that most casual games are actually doing that. Which, you know, if you're a monetization expert and your goal is to raise revenue and you say, listen, if I cheat 3% of the time by tweaking my random numbers, we're actually doing 10% more revenue, you would do that. I can't blame them. But on the other hand, if you can actually prove it and you see a level, this is not solvable, they can claim, oh, it's random, that's the reason why it's not solvable, you know, it's by accident. Well, I don't believe that. But it could all be a mind trick. That's the reason why I say this. Mind trick means that the brain has the strange function that you remember negative things more than positive things in certain levels. Meaning that whenever that happens, that you don't get a color for 20 turns, remember that. And if you remember that repeatable times, you suddenly overemphasize that effect. So from 100 games, only 5 games showed that effect that you don't get the right color, which is totally within the random aspect. So, you know, it might be a mind trick unless some statistician, mathematician from a high-end university actually proves me wrong. You know, I just say relatively, okay, they might cheat or not. But if you play their games, you know, you can actually check yourself. My recommendation is that if you play Candy Crush or Soda Saga or one of their games, you should also play Big Fish's title called Gummy Drop, because they managed to totally remove the negative side effect of cheating, because they put all the power boost into the game as a natural part of the gameplay. And that's a really good move. They have other problems, like they don't have dual currency, they have inflation problems and some other stuff, but the title entered the top 50 top grossing now, and I bet that this title might compete with Candy Crush if they correct some of the problems they have. But nevertheless, if you're a game designer and you're into casual gaming, you should play Candy Crush and Gummy Drop, and I bet at some point you will only play Gummy Drop and not stop playing like we do. It's a beautifully designed game, and it's interesting how the evolution takes place between those two games. Yes, it's a stupid match 3 title. I say stupid because, you know, it's so easy to do, but on the other hand, I can stop playing, meaning that, you know, there's something motivating in this. And specifically by comparing these games to each other and how they monetize. Well, thank you very much for listening. I would love you to check out my other dissecting talks about World of Tanks, Puzzle Dragons, League of Legends. You can contact me either over Twitter, email, or Facebook. And if you want to do me a favor, in a couple of weeks, my next title, Assassin's Creed Identity, I did the monetization for Ubisoft, is shipping on mobile worldwide at some point. That you check that title out. Thank you.
Wow, excellent talk as always, Teut. Really great stuff. Let's just open the questions up. We've got one right here.
Just a quick question. What happened to? Oh, sorry. What happened to Bejeweled, which was like the king of match game when way back? The biggest selling PC game, at least where I come from, and I'm just wondering. Yeah, EA owns Bejeweled franchise.
Bejeweled invented the match 3,
yeah, I mean, correct? Yeah, and then EA bought PopCap. What happened?
Yes. Well, you have the answer. EA bought them and screwed it up. They usually destroy most companies they buy. I'm sorry, anyone from EA here? I have a history with EA for 30 years, so forgive me that. The thing is that the game which had most users was Bejeweled Blitz, but financially it was a complete failure, and that's something not many people know. So they didn't know how to properly monetize it. King actually put the correct monetization on that and took basically the fame away from Bejeweled. Yeah.
Well, one small question. You mentioned socialized. Do you have any percentage? How many players of Candy Crush actually share lives? When you're requesting friends, you're out of lives, and you can ask your friends to give you a life or move in the game. Mm-hmm. Does the numbers you have access to give any percentage? How many players actually percentage-wise request such viral method?
But you mean how many players every player basically brings with him by actually doing that?
No, what I mean is you got 100 million players. How many people are actually asking for lives and moves? Meaning how many people are using this method instead of just buying lives?
Everybody who connected their game to Facebook is doing it. Everybody, because it's just one click. So it's like by default they're pressing the button because you only get positive stuff out of it, and both of them get rewards. That's the key here. And this is also a key reason here that if King.com recruits a player that way, they know that every player entering the game gets 1, 2, or 3 new players with them. So one user acquisition is worth like 2 or 3 users for them. That's one of the reasons they can spend so much money on their user acquisition. You can imagine they're spending like $4 or $5 per user sometimes. No one can earn as much money, right? Unless you're spending the lifetime value of not only the original user you acquire, but also of one friend he gets with you, and you're counting that the third friend he actually get with him, that's your profit. That's how they calculate and raise the user acquisition costs. And we are all suffering about it because we cannot pay that. That's the trick.
Thank you.
Here front row, please.
One more question.
Hi, thank you for the talk. So I'm actually living with a Candy Crush addict at home, and what I noticed and sort of figures with your talk is that this is a very strong addiction, and it's very similar to other addictions that you can spot in life. And so you mentioned a lot of things as bad practices, the button that makes you buy, a lot of things that are sort of abusing their own users,
yes.
And yet it's the biggest game on the planet. So it makes you think again about this addiction where we know things that are bad for you.
It is not the big, It is not the biggest game due to the fact that because it's addictive, there are a lot of things out there like TV series addiction, soccer addiction, whatever, it's just gaming addiction is just one of that. The thing you should not forget is that the King.com games were big before mobile hit the market. So they had the huge advantage of having 30, 40 million or 60 million reach on Facebook, and they could convert over half of that to mobile. And that was their start. So it didn't mean that they grew from 0 to 100 million users by just on mobile using addictive methods. Key fact is that every game which is fun can be addictive. Any game. Doesn't matter, even if it's fair or free or whatever. But there are certain games who are using what I call gambling mechanics to actually make you, to address the weak point in your brain where you get gambling addicted. I'm totally against these mechanics, like Lucky Wheel, mystery boxes, and all that crap. But many other companies are actually making their money with that. In my opinion, that's not a good thing, and gambling should stay out of this business. But this is just my own opinion. I'm also, I should not criticize this conference. Nevertheless, I'm someone who actually removes gambling stuff from our games, from most of the clients I work for. Because there are reasons, there are better ways doing it than the gambling stuff. But addicting is a little bit too harsh because if you remove that phone from her, I guess, after 2 days she's totally over it. There's no depends.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up again for the king of Casual Connect, Teut WEIDEMANN.